Okay, thank you. Everyone, welcome to Joint Minerals Interim Planning. Just for the record, we'll do a roll call, please. Senator Cooper. Here. Senator Ellis. Excused. Senator Jones. Here. Senator Rothfuss. Excused. Chairman Dockstader. Here. Representative Banks.
Excused.
Representative Conrad.
Excused. They're in ag.
Representative Heiner.
Here.
Representative Knapp. Here. Representative Larson.
Here.
Representative Lawley.
Here.
Representative Tarver. Here. Representative Western.
He was here. Excused, I guess. Well, okay, and Conrad just walked in.
Chairman Burkhart.
Here.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you.
Brian, could you get that door? For some reason, we're getting a lot of noise from the hall. Thank you. Go ahead, Dan.
All right, let's get started. This is how we're going to do it. A little less formal, but still nonetheless, let's work somewhat through the chair, but I'll allow you to have some exchange back and forth quickly with the elected representatives and senators up here. We've got a variety of topics here, folks. We're going to go through them quickly. This isn't the time to make the decision. This is the time to gather the information. And those on the committee, make note of those topics you're most impressed with, and then get with your respective chairs, and we'll start to refine the process before we take the topics to Management Council, which I understand may be as late as April, but we'll see. At this point, let's get started. Chairman Burkhart and I will tag team. I'll get things started. We had a request for an early presentation on clarification of non-coal blasting regulatory requirements. This is on page 6. And could we have, it's Director Parfit, you're testifying on this? Go ahead, gentlemen, for the record, just like we usually do. State your names and titles, and let's get started.
Remind them you are live.
Yeah.
So thank you, Mr. Chairman. Todd Parfit, Director of the Department of Environmental Quality. And this particular interim topic is related to non-coal blasting, and to provide clarification. As we've seen more and more non-coal development, hard rock mine development, there's been an apparent need that we need to take a look at our blasting regulations in conjunction with workforce services and the state mine inspector. So this would be an effort with both agencies to review current statutory provisions and identify any areas where we need to make changes to the statute to accommodate efficient permitting of the non-coal mines.
Thank you, Director. Your associate there? Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Kyle Wentland. I'm the administrator of the Land Quality Division, which oversees the solid mineral mining. The only item I would add is that we are seeing an increase in large-scale non-coal operations. At this time, we've got, for example, the CK Gold operation west of Cheyenne on the books. We could potentially see the rare earth mine moving forward. And we haven't looked at these in a long time. And I think there are some clarification points that would be potentially helpful.
Thank you. Committee questions for these gentlemen? And everybody speak close to their mics. We're still working out the acoustics of these two rooms on the end of the Capitol. Go ahead. Okay. All right.
Mr. Chairman.
Go, Chair. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Wentland, this is a high priority for the department. Am I correct?
Mr. Chairman, I would put this as one of the higher priorities for my division. I would defer to the director as far as the agency priorities.
Okay. And follow up, Mr. Chairman. So with this, do we currently have any non-coal blasting regulations, or are you going to have to develop them from scratch?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, depending on where we ultimately find ourselves with the review and the clarification in the statutes, we may require some additional rulemaking.
All right. All right. We're just going to allow the exchanges to go back and forth so we can expedite everything. Anything else you gentlemen would like to point out while you're here?
Mr. Chairman, not on this topic.
Okay, thank you. Director Cooley? Director Cooley? Do you have anything on this, Director Cooley? Okay. All right, let's go back to page 1. Thank you, gentlemen. Let's go back to the first topic, ESG financial discrimination investments. Do we have Representative Chip Nyman here? We don't. Anybody would like to testify on this?
Mr. Chairman, I'll take this one real quick. Representative Nyman had a bill that came through House Minerals, failed in committee, but it has a fair amount of usefulness to it. And I told Representative Nyman we would consider taking it up on the interim as a discussion and a potential bill due to his patience and that with it. So that's all there is to it. It's on the ESG issues that are facing the state.
Committee, questions on the ESG issues? Committee? All right, that topic. Make notes as you go through this as to what you think is important and not, or I should say less important, and so that we can follow up after this meeting. Okay, next topic. Evaluation of Harvard Growth Lab report and recommendations of growth. Representative Stith, is he in the room? No. Anybody would like to testify on this? Committee, any questions on this?
Chairman.
Go ahead, Senator Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a continuation of the work we did a couple of years ago, that Harvard report. I think it's something that probably needs to be looked at pretty hard. Whether we do it in the interim or not is for everybody's own discretion, but something we sure need to make sure we're looking into. The work's been done. Let's see what the report says.
Go ahead,
So,
Co-Chair.
Mr. Chairman, I think they owe us a report sometime here in the near future. We could probably have that at one of our meetings.
Any further questions, committee? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Senator Cooper, for bringing us up to date. Page 2. Promotion of invention. Again, Representative Stith. He's not here. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've had conversations with Representative Stith about this. So briefly, the concept is to try and put in place better mechanisms within the state of Wyoming to incentivize invention and innovation and intellectual property, to explore possible vehicles for that, where that could be university, could be through the Wyoming Business Council, could be a combination thereof, engage community colleges. But basically, Representative Stith is trying to find ways to promote the development of intellectual property and invention in the state of Wyoming for the benefit of our economic development and our university and higher education systems.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Senator Rothfuss? Committee, questions? Anybody else would like to testify on this from the audience? Okay, all right. Keep your notes. On to the next one. Review of 2020 HB 14, and I see Senator Boner enter the room. Go ahead, sir.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee, it's good to be here. This is a topic that the Joint Minerals Committee took up in I think the 2019 interim. Produced a lot of significant changes when it came to force pooling and risk penalty statutes. And yeah, we had a bill on the Senate side that attempted to deal with that. As far as I'm concerned, the way I understood the bill and the way it's explained to me by members of the legislature, unintended consequences have had some significant impacts in the Powder River Basin, dealing, in our case, with the royalty rate. One part of that change was we had a 16% minimum royalty rate, which did not function as I thought it was going to function, at least. So understand that this is a big topic. It was a huge change with that piece of legislation, and we probably don't exactly know all the effects of it because it's definitely a process, and at the end, the tail end of the process is eventually a well produces a certain amount of revenue, and at that point, we had some provisions where a non-participating interest owner could opt in. We haven't quite got to that part of that tail end of the process, but I just point out that there's parts at the beginning of the process that were the effects were felt immediately. So if this is something that we could take up as a committee, it's, like I said, it is a massive change, and I think it's okay to take a look back and see what's working and what isn't. Certainly, it's had a almost immediate impact on folks who own minerals. Most or a lot of them, longtime ranching families in Commerce and Campbell counties. So that's the topic, Mr. Chairman. I'll stand for questions.
Senator, as I recall, this is early in the session. You got that partially through the process, or where were we with this?
What's that, Mr. Chairman?
This bill, how far through the process? This was early in the session we worked this.
Right, yeah, the committee, the Senate Minerals Committee did not take any action with the idea that that it would be an interim
Back to
topic.
the interim, okay.
And recognizing that it was one part of a very significant change.
Thank you. Members of the committee, questions for Senator Boner? Senator Boner, anybody else would like to testify in this in the audience? All right, we'll move along. Thank you, Senator Boner. Go ahead, Senator Rothfuss.
Just very briefly on that, I do think this is a very important topic, and it might not just be a one interim topic. There's an awful lot going on there. I don't know whether we'll know enough to know what needs to be changed during the next interim, but there was so much work done on it. It was so dramatic in terms of the magnitude of the change that I think it is important for us to get feedback, understand the process as a committee, and then whether it's the next interim or the following interim, take appropriate action. So it's a good one for us to follow up on.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I think there's a couple I noticed on this topic and probably could be combined together at some point, but I just wanted to note that we're going to see a few others, I think.
Yeah, welcome. Make notes on that, and when you work with your chair, let's possibly do that. Thank you. Any other further comments on this? Go to page 3 then. Let's go to economic opportunities for school trust land management. Ms. Herman, are you in the room? Go ahead.
Thank you, Co-Chairman and Committee. My name is Marguerite Herman, and I'm a board member of the group called Advocates for School Trust Lands, and we focus on management of school trust assets in mostly western states at this point. And I will just say that school trust lands in the past have been in the purview of the Joint Ag Committee, and they do a good job at looking at uses of those lands, which, just backtrack a little bit, is the sole purpose of the land when we received them at statehood was to produce income for public schools. So the chief beneficiaries are public schools, public school children. And going back that, so joint ag is great for looking at agricultural uses for productions, and they do a good job, I think, at looking at opportunities and that sort of thing. There was a bill that came before them, had been amended in the House and included looking beyond ag, looking to affordable housing specifically. So there were provisions in the bill about residential leases. It was testified by OSLI that there were opportunities for cities, counties, municipalities for affordable housing if they could lease school sections. And so it included a provision for an extended lease time period and that sort of thing. And did not make with a great reception there, but I will just have to say that I think there's a lot of opportunity, for economic development for the state, in addition to producing more revenue for the purpose, for the beneficiaries. But I think it just occurred to me that minerals, economic development and business would be a great place to explore other opportunities. And OSLI has already done a lot of the work, so I don't think it would require a lot of, from square one kind of thing. They have done some leasing, they have information, they have a process for judging rates and that sort of thing. So I think it would take that information and then going forward policy-wise, how to use this, and especially the affordable housing piece. I know a lot of you are from communities who are landlocked and are really looking for housing that their essential workers can use. There probably are other opportunities to look at. That's the one that I took out of the bill. That's the one that I bring before you today. You may find other things as well.
Thank you. Committee questions for Ms. Herman? Committee? Go ahead, Co-Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Ms. Herman, how do you address the issue that most of the state trust land, the use and value and income from that land is designated by both the Constitution and the Act of Admission.
Go ahead.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I guess how do I'm not sure. You want me to sort of weigh in on that, I guess?
Okay, explanation. You're indicating to use that state trust land income for housing when most of it is specifically assigned to schools, the penitentiary, and that is in Constitution and in the Act of Admission.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, I understand now the question. The revenue obviously is designated by Constitution and Act of Admission for public education. I'm thinking using the trust asset, using the land, using that sort of thing. They're just using the leases and the leasing ability, making those trust sections. It's land is what we're talking about, making it accessible so that it can be, so there's a process to lease the land from the state and for affordable housing specifically. But right now, the provisions for the length of lease and that sort of thing is not, it doesn't make it convenient. And I'm thinking, so I'm sorry if I was unclear, but yeah, the revenue is definitely dedicated to the beneficiaries, but the use of the land, I think maybe we could widen our scope of ways to use the land that could enhance economic development and business in our state.
Thank you. Anybody else from the committee would like to ask? Okay, anybody in the audience would like to talk to this? Nope, all right, thank you, Ms. Erman, appreciate it. Okay, repurposing industrial sites, County Commissioners Association. Jeremiah, are you in the room? Oh, you're, okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jim Willix, Converse County Commissioner, and here on behalf of the Wyoming County Commissioners Association, not Jeremiah. You know, this idea is not a new one, and I know Chairman Burkhart, you've represented this forward, or brought this forward as well. Give you a specific example. The reclamation bonding may require a lot of the mine sites to be brought back to their pre-mining situation. But let's say you've got a rail spur or a building that's out there that may be repurposed into something else, but can't be released because of the bonding requirement. That's one specific example of how this might be able to adjust our bonding requirements so that we can repurpose these buildings during this transition we're looking at. And Wyoming chapter of the Nature Conservatory is also working on an inventory. We'll kind of look at what those opportunities may be and those kind of specifics, but also look at repurposing other industrial sites, whether they be brownfields or others, and how we can capitalize on new opportunities. So we would hope you would consider this moving forward, and I would stand for any questions.
Commissioner, when do you anticipate that inventory list to be ready?
I believe somebody here can answer that.
Go ahead and join. State your name. Battle. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Monica Leininger. I'm the Director of Energy and Climate Solutions on behalf of the Wyoming chapter of the Nature Conservancy. We're really excited to share this study with the committee. It should be available March 15th, and it should really give us a good idea of the assets that Wyoming has.
Monica, would you see that this joint committee gets a copy of that? Email?
Yes, of course.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Any questions for Monica or the commissioner? Any questions? All right. Go ahead.
Thank you. Monica, I know that the inventory is going to be in there. Is there anything else that we should be looking for in there as we're contemplating these topics?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss, I think the inventory will really inform a lot of this process. And I think that last time that this topic was explored, we had a lot of unanswered questions, and this inventory will help to answer those.
Thank you. Just curious on the inventory, Monica. It's you'll have each site detailed out. Is that what you anticipate?
Yes, with the assets on those sites, particularly what infrastructure those sites have.
Thank you. Look forward to seeing it. Mr. Co-Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Monica, are you also including ones that have already been used in this manner? Say the old Interim plant in Laramie. I think that was converted into an industrial park.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Representative or Co-Chairman Burkhart, I am not totally sure of the answer to that question. I can follow up with you.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner, did you have anything else?
No, sir, Mr. Chairman. Just think it's an opportunity we don't want to miss.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else in the room would like to note on this? Offer note? All right. Thank you. Appreciate
Thank you, Mr.
coming.
Chairman.
All right, continue on to the next page, page 4. Advanced Recycling Statute Amendments. Jason Beggar is in the room. Go ahead, Mr. Beggar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jason Mager on behalf of the American Chemistry Council. One of the projects or initiatives that the council has been taking over the last couple of years is trying to standardize and update advanced recycling language and statute across the U.S. So far, in over 20 states, they've been successful in updating those statutes to allow for certain types of technologies that I guess just weren't on the books and weren't available when a lot of these statutes are written. For example, the types of advanced recycling that they're looking for or looking at are things that aren't easily recyclable. We know things like our water bottles, soda bottles, certain things, they can kind of basically melt them down to recycle that. There are other types of really difficult plastics to recycle, such as cellophane, food wrappers, certain pharmaceutical packaging, that the best way to handle that, instead of just landfilling it, is actually gasifying it, or pyrolysis, or there's other types of technologies that they can use to break that plastic down into its original chemical components and as a syngas feedstock that then can be reused to remanufacture other products. In a state like Wyoming, it's the same type of technology that we've been talking about for years with like coal gasification. In a lot of instances, a facility like this could be co-located at a coal gasification or even a biomass gasification type of facility. So what the American Chemistry Council would like to do is work through Wyoming recycling statutes to update this to allow this type of activity to happen. It's looking at some of the draft legislation they've done in some other states. It's not a super complicated bill, but it would take some time to go through and change definitions and languages through various parts of Wyoming code. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Why do you think they're interested in Wyoming, Mr. Beggar? Why do you think they're interested in Wyoming?
Well, I think part of it is there's a familiarity with gasification and the ability to co-locate a facility, as well as kind of standardization across all 50 states is really helpful for their membership. While Wyoming isn't home to the major petrochemical producers, Wyoming still does have, I think, 8 members of the American Chemistry Council on a smaller level.
What's it cost to put one of these things together?
The cost, so many factors that go into that, but it'd be a major industrial facility.
Rough shot?
I think $500 million probably isn't out of the realm. And my opinion is you would co-locate this with other types of gasification, you know, like a coal or biomass, I think would make a
Understood.
lot more sense.
Thank you. Mr. Co-Chair, did you?
Director Parfit, do you have any comments on this? How much effort would this be from the department, please?
Go ahead, Director.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman. Listening to the description here, I don't know that we would necessarily need to do anything because we don't permit processes like this. What we would do is permit the emissions, either air, any waste that is generated, and we'd be looking at those factors. Is there going to be any water discharge? And is it going to meet industrial siting jurisdiction? Those would be the factors that we would be looking at. So I'm not totally clear on what exactly we would do statutorily to change that.
Appreciate
Thank
you
you.
coming up. Members of the committee, questions for either of these gentlemen? All right, thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it. Anybody else in the room want to testify on this? Let's proceed. I'll do a couple more. Yeah, review and development of statutory amendments and policies to promote carbon capture. Randall, you been staying up nights thinking about this?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I might have a word or two about it, so thank you for the opportunity. First of all, this committee has long been involved in energy development in Wyoming, and over the years, it has actually set up the framework for an active carbon sequestration and carbon capture program. You have HB 200, Senate File 159, all which deal with coal-fired utilities, and this committee took a real interest on what we can do to keep coal as a viable fuel. This year, Senate File 142, I think, brought the attention to at least those of us that were working on it through the Corporations Committee, that there really are a lot of pieces out there that are probably could be tied together much closer than they currently are. We have a huge amount of federal money that might be available for demonstration or pilot projects. We have tax credits known as 45Q that could be used for the sequestration as well as carbon capture. So as we looked at it, we had 159 going one way, 200 going the other way. And if I could lift my foot up, I'd tell you that 142 was going another way. But maybe the time has come for this committee to really look at, see where we are, what's working, what we can do. Because Wyoming still produces or exports just about 80% of its electricity. We want to continue to be able to do that. But we also want to make sure that this electricity, it can be decarbonized. There's no reason that coal, fossil fuels can't remain a vital part of this nation's energy source.
Appreciate your desire to do that. I'm sure there are a lot of other states would like our electricity too. Thank you. Committee, questions for Mr. Luthi? Appreciate the governor's office being here today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee.
Okay, thank you. All right, take one more here. Review of carbon capture, storage, and sequestration technologies, statutes, and rules. Mr. Obermuller, go ahead.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Pete Obermuller, Petroleum Association of Wyoming. Tacking on to Mr. Luthi's conversation, we would request that the committee take a pretty deep dive into CCUS technology. There's a lot to learn about it, and there's a lot to discuss with respect to Wyoming's regulatory and legislative framework with respect to carbon capture, utilization, and storage. Mr. Chairman, I would just note that Wyoming has a lot going for it in this regard, and the window right now is wide open with respect to our leadership and our ability to get out front on it. Lots of news stories just this past week about how the other states, with the exception of North Dakota, other states that really want to move quickly on carbon capture and sequestration are being hamstrung by the EPA, who doesn't want to give any permits out. Well, we have primacy on this in Wyoming, and so does North Dakota. And while the EPA wants to drag its feet, we want to move. So we need to make sure that we have, that our rules and regulations are on good footing in terms of the roles and responsibilities of each agency. We need to make sure that we have the right structures in place that can help us take advantage of this window. There are some suggestions out there that I think would probably back us up toward the EPA as opposed to move us forward. And we really have an opportunity here, Mr. Chairman, and I hope that we can spend quite a bit of time on it.
Thank you, Mr. Obermuller. Would you explain the primacy concept for the committee here?
Mr. Chairman, yes, I can explain the concept. It essentially it regards the class 6 of underground of injection, and Director Parfit can go way into the weeds on it. But essentially, it's the EPA is in charge of it, but they can, like other regulations in Wyoming, they can delegate that authority to the state as long as the state meets certain requirements. There's only 2 states that have been given that primacy, North Dakota and Wyoming. There are others who are desperately scrambling for it and haven't gotten it, and others who have just chosen to work with the EPA, which is never a good choice. But we have we have it, and it really does put us well ahead of the pack in order to promote this technology.
Thank you. Important topic. Committee, questions? Questions?
Mr. Chairman?
Any questions? Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
Just, I appreciate the speed with which you guys are moving, and so in order to not come back and forth, I just want to offer comments on a couple other of topics real quick while I'm up here, and then I won't get back up again. Number one, on the ESG topics, which are in here 2 or 3 times.
Right.
I just wanted to let the committee know that PAW has requested that topic be taken up by the Capital Finance Committee. And the reason for that is because there is lots of distractions that happen on ESG. And the important part for Wyoming about ESG is how is our portfolio impacted by both on the investment side and on the management side as it relates to our how important our investments are in Wyoming. That's where we need to be laser focused about how ESG is influencing that and how we can help to influence it from the standpoint of our sovereign wealth fund. And it can really be really laser focused at the Capital Finance Committee, and that's where we requested to go, and perhaps would save you some time and distraction.
Thank you.
And then the last,
And I've suggested that that was a good committee as well. Yeah. And there were more than one late night conversation on that topic. Go ahead, though.
good. Lastly, Mr. Chairman, I would just note on the forced
Mr.
pooling
Chairman,
discussion.
I have a question on that.
I'm sorry.
So I just want to be clear, Mr. Obermuller, you're suggesting that we let that one, and there's another comment in here, go to CapFin. Am I correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you.
Before we leave that, committee ESG. Okay. Continue your next topic.
The last one I wanted to mention, Mr. Chairman, I think was the last one, was just the issue brought up earlier with respect to forced pooling. With carbon capture and all the rest of the stuff on this list, you have a lot to do here. And forced pooling, as those of you who are on the committee will remember in 2019, that took a significant amount of time, hours and hours and hours. And while I agree that we should look at it, we passed that in 2020, and you all know what happened in 2020 and 2021. The actual impacts of that bill are not known. In our opinion, it's too soon to look at that, and it's something that should be talked about in the next interim. Most specifically, Senator Boner was talking about the impact of landowners on the 16%, but what we haven't gotten to the point of understanding yet is all of the other things in that bill put in there in order to help mineral owners in the statute, but we haven't gotten to the point where we can even evaluate that yet. So if you look at it, that's fine. Of course, happy to do it. I just don't think you'll have all the data necessary to be a meaningful conversation for the committee.
Thank you. Committee on forced pooling. Any comments?
Mr. Chairman, so Mr. Obermuller, how do you feel about, say, an educational program for the committee on forced pooling, considering the complexity of that issue?
Mr. Chairman, that'd be perfect. Happy to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Double check. Does Senator Boner, he's left the room. I was going to give him a rebuttal time. Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks for your indulgence, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Co-Chair, you want to take a few? All right, here we go. All right, Claire, we already did 6, yeah. On page 7, folks, CO2 capture, utilization, sequestration. That's you.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chairman. And I think a number of these CCUS issues we can combine into one. The first one here, and they're ABC, as you can see, I would ask Director Parfit to come up and he can talk about that one. I ran a running list during the session on what we needed, so that's why there's so many duplications in here.
Director, and you've got a helper this time, and we should probably keep you closer to the podium. Go ahead.
So Director, I think it's the first one on the list of recommended priorities that you had requested. Page 7, yes.
Yeah, so Mr. Chairman and Co-Chairman, what our interest in this is that there is an opportunity for assessing fees for the general program implementation. There are fees collected, but they don't cover all of the cost of the program. And right now, some of those activities, functions of the agency are covered by general funds. And so it would just be an opportunity to explore that. Do we want to continue it with general funding, or do we want to explore fees? I will say that consistent with North Dakota and what other states are looking at with their programs is to charge a fee for the general administration of the program. So that would be the first one.
Okay. Committee, as we proceed, any questions? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As we talk about fees, I wonder if we could open this up also to some revenue, potential revenue for the state as CO2 is being contemplated to be transported into the state from outside. When we first developed this CCUS legislation, we were contemplating only sequestering our own CO2, but now we may become a disposal area for other states. And I wonder if we could discuss possibility of creating revenue from this CO2 that may be transported into Wyoming.
Revenue's a nice thing, Director.
Just to continue on, one of the other things is the interstate pore space as it relates to transfer of title and liability. And so, for example, if you have a facility where they're using pore space in Nebraska, is that something that the state wants to take on the long-term liability for, or can they? That's one other piece of this discussion. And then the other thing that I would just throw out there is from the previous speaker, which would be to provide an overview and a background on what the primacy program is, and then what EPA's role is in the oversight and so forth.
Mr. Co-Chair, were you reaching for the mic?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was going to say, if you look down through the small alphabet here, Representative Heiners is, I believe, E, so we can address that as we get to it.
Okay, thank you.
So,
All right. Director Heiner, you have a co-spokesman. Or, sorry, Director Parfit.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, Jennifer Zygmunt, who is the administrator for the Water Quality Division and also oversees the Class 6 UIC program. And she can provide a little bit of detail of where the program is currently.
Jennifer?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Currently, we have 4 applications for Class 6 wells in-house. Those are under review. We do expect another 6 to 18 under projects that have come into us to talk about pre-application filing. So those are pretty definitive projects in the queue. And then just to give you a sense of what we're looking at over the coming years, we have heard about another 40 to upwards of 50 wells being proposed in various parts of the state. So we are seeing a very high interest. I would agree that the primacy is very important to Wyoming. We're very proud to have primacy and implement this Class 6 permitting program. But we do anticipate quite a few more projects coming in over the next 2 to 3 years.
Jennifer, what's the time frame for each one of those, and do you have manpower to keep up with the demand?
Mr. Chairman, we would estimate probably about a year for permit issuance would be a very quick turnaround, given the length of the Class 6 applications and the pretty detailed and technical review process associated with those. Currently, we have staff to implement the program with the anticipated workload. We did request a new position in the budget this year that has been approved, and so we will have 1 devoted FTE for the Class 6 program. We'll continue to evaluate workloads as we have more definitive projects be added to the queue, and if we feel like we need additional staff resources, we'll be bringing that to your attention.
Since there might be committee questions for Jennifer, Director Parfit.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just say one other thing, is that we do understand that there will be an increase in the need for additional resources, staffing in particular, and we'll be bringing that forward through our budget request and the budget process next year.
As you leave, just an overall summary thought, where we're going to go with all this. It falls in your laps. Summary thought as you step away here. There's a lot changing rapidly in the state.
That's true. There's a lot changing rapidly, and we're starting to see an increase in interest because of the tax credits and other factors. So we will be making an assessment of that and making that request in the budget.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Glad to have your expertise, both of you. Thank you.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'll just move on quickly. Under B was to evaluate administrative changes needed in our unitization statutes. There have been a request for that. Mr. Obermuller may want to say something on that one. Mr. Obermuller, do you wish to say anything on the unitization review? What's that? I don't need to. Okay. So, thank you. Probably have another one on my list was DEQ to present rules for CO2 storage and their progress on it. And I think we've just got a quick update on that, including addressing the numerous CO2 projects on the drawing board, which are going to be a major impact to the state. Sequestration tax, this has come up. I'm on E. by a number of people, especially CO2 sequestered from outside Wyoming.
For those in the audience, just say exactly where you're at.
I'm on page 7 in, so
All right.
I put all of this in one rather than splitting it up. So, and that's a concept only, and F was a concept I've talked to some of the power companies about, of a voluntary fee on coal going to the power plants, and in return, those power plants can dispose of their CO2 in Wyoming. And those are conceptual. They all, I think, kind of work together with a number of other topics on the interim agenda right now. Excuse me. But I don't know why we're getting that feedback. So that was it. If there's any questions on those, glad to answer them, but I think we can move on.
Keep going.
And then on 12, well, I numbered them all so I could keep track of them. So at the bottom of page 7, that goes back to the topic we've already discussed on the blasting issues. Okay, page 8, regional transmission organizations, Wyoming electrical reliability. I do have some concerns on what creating a regional transmission organization that includes Wyoming would do to Wyoming and our PSC. I think that's something we do need to look at coming up. I know that some of the states adjacent to us frankly can't meet their green goals unless they force Wyoming into an RTO, and I would oppose that. So I think it's just something for the committee to look at and consider. Questions? Okay, moving on. Next one on page 8 would be electric generation tax. We had one bill this session, House Bill 288, which didn't proceed to the floor. And I know there's some interest on the governor's office in this area. A lot of interest from the legislature on, we ship most of our electricity out of state, and are we getting anything for it? Plus the issue of equity between all the various means of generation. For example, wind pays $1 a megawatt tax, but solar doesn't pay anything. So that was that one. Any questions? Okay. Rare earths, critical materials. I guess mostly an update. We have the demonstration plant going in up in Upton and the mine potential in Sundance. And there's another company that is looking at developing a mine west of us. Don't ask me how, but I picked up a news broadcast on from Australia, and they interviewed that company. And we don't seem to know much about that mine, which I think we should. And that's going to be a major impact to the state. Their parent company has offered to come in and talk to us, so I think that's a worthwhile concept. Middle of page 9, issues with DEQ. I think we've already talked about some of those, especially the staffing issue. Yes. Okay, any questions on the rare earth critical materials? No? Okay. So that middle one, just the topic is DEQ. I think it's to look at their staffing issues. If you notice from this, we have a lot of stuff that's going to fall to that agency, and we need to make sure they're adequately staffed to address those issues. So, okay, that's that one. Then at the bottom, some individuals came to me and just with a general comment on Industrial Siting Act, of maybe it's time to review it. I think there have been a few bills over the last few years to go back and address some of that on industrial siting program, industrial siting council, and all of those things. So any questions on either of those two? Okay. We had the ESG issues we've already talked about. I'm on page 10. Bottom of page 10, nuclear industry development issues. I think we're due for an update, probably from the department on where we stand. We had the source material bill that will help our rare earth companies. But I think we need to have an update on where we stand with the nuclear industry in Wyoming and some of the activities that have been going on I know there's one company that's indicated that they want a reactor for industrial use. So, any questions? All right. Boy, you're an easy crowd. You get a chance to question the committee and you don't. School of Energy, I'm on page 11, School of Energy Resources, just an update on all the projects they have going and some issues related to the Integrated Test Center and some of the other things we're doing. Questions? Okay, Wyoming Energy Authority, mainly probably an update on that with the fact that they're getting they'll have a new executive director sometime during the interim and probably need to bring that person in and grill them profusely on their aims for that agency. Or instrumentality, I'm sorry. It's not an agency. Plus, a number of people have raised the issue about the bonding requirements and the bonding availability in those statutes, so we may want to take a look at those. Questions? Okay, just oil and gas, I'm on page 12, oil and gas issues in general. And that goes along with some of the force pooling we've talked about, so I don't think we need to, that can be combined. Same with the next item, statute status review on 159 and 200. We've talked about that one already. Probably at the bottom of page 12, a presentation from our Public Service Commission on what they do, how they do it, mainly education for the committee. Representative Heiner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With the Public Service Commission, we've got a number of coal-fired power plants that will be slated for retirement in the near future. I would like to explore what kind of remediation reclamation costs will be involved in those and what kind of reserves the owners have for remediation and reclamation. I just am curious and want to make sure that the rates for our electricity don't increase here in the next few years as these coal-fired power plants are being reclaimed.
Good point, Representative. So I've made some notes. I hope you have too on that. We can add that in there. So top of page 13, and I've had a general discussion on workforce issues. And I think at this point, I'd ask Director Cooley to come forward, if you would, please. You know the old saying about attending a meeting you really weren't invited to, what happens? So Director Cooley and I have had a brief discussion on workforce issues, and I think it's something we need to look at because frankly, we don't have enough people to staff all these projects in the state of Wyoming. So Director, your thoughts, please.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Robin Cooley, Director of the Wyoming Department of Workforce Services. It's a pleasure to be here today. The issue that you raise is one that I hear statewide. Where are all the people? What are we doing? And certainly we have a couple of unemployment insurance benefit program statutes that you considered this year around the issue of individuals perhaps being on unemployment insurance too long. It's not a question that's easily answered. I've read so many articles, I've read so much research on this topic, and the dynamic in the workplace right now is just so much different than it was before COVID. We don't know where a lot of these people are, but I would point to the Harvard Growth Lab report that indicates in Wyoming, a lot of those individuals did retire. So in Wyoming, that's a number of them. Certainly a number of them are staying home due to childcare issues that resulted from COVID. Certainly a number of them are staying home due to concerns about health or health of family members. But overall, we don't know where those individuals are. We don't know what's going on with them. In our agency, we've got a number of grant programs that we have been ramping up in order to help train, upskill individuals that are currently in the workforce. We've got a new program, relatively new, for internships that has really just, we're actually trying to figure out how we can slow the churn on that because there's been so much interest in that internship program, to be quite honest with you. And we're looking at our funding and trying to be fiscally appropriate with that. But a lot of interest in that, a lot of interest in apprenticeships. We're ramping up our efforts in that area as well. So I don't know if that answers, well, I know it doesn't answer the question because we don't know what the answer to the question is. But those are some of the efforts that we're taking on in our agency to address the issue.
Go ahead.
Director Cooley, less people out there searching for jobs. We had some office closures in your department. Was that because they're just not being used enough, or what's the situation there?
And I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
We have less people out there in the workforce, right?
Yes, that's correct.
So I know one office closure is because we don't have enough people out there trying to find solutions to their employment. What are your plans with those offices?
Our office closure, our workforce centers?
Yeah.
We did, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, we were required to, or we did feel it was necessary to close 2 of our offices, our brick and mortar offices across the state, one in Newcastle, one in Afton. The main purpose for that were the increases in leasing costs that we've seen in some of our facilities across the state. So we took a look at that, and we took a look at the number of walk-ins that we had in those 2 areas. And what we felt was we can go to the people instead of the people coming to us in those areas. So what we're doing is we've got people that travel into those areas routinely. They meet either in the library, they meet with individuals we've got an MOU with one of the community public meeting areas there in Afton. So we're going to the people there instead of them coming into our brick and mortar spaces. So it wasn't an issue of us not having enough people to fill or to fill spots in those businesses. It was a matter of us needing to look at our finances and our costs and reduce where we could.
Thank you.
So Director, excuse me, do you think this is an important enough issue to take up during the interim, or are we just spinning our wheels knowing what the problem is already?
Mr. Chairman, great question. I think it's an issue that we all need to be looking at. It's an issue that has been raised in labor health. We discussed it a little bit yesterday in labor health joint committee as well. I think it's an issue that, along with the Business Council, along with our Community College Commission and the community colleges and the university through the WIP project, I think it's an issue that jointly and collaboratively, we have a number of agencies that are working on the issue. Would it be a good idea for routinely reporting to the legislature, to this committee? Absolutely. It's that critical in this state. We're seeing so many incredible projects coming into this state, and we need to be able, number one, fill the workforce for these projects. But another issue that is critical in that discussion is housing. So reporting to the committee, reporting on what's going on would be, I think, a very good idea.
Okay, thank you, Director. So I've made some notes here. So maybe best have this handled by Labor Health and potentially cross over with Education, but just give this committee a report.
Mr. Chairman, absolutely.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you. All right. Thank you, Director. Anybody else on the workforce issues? Okay. The next one I had was the impact of House Bill 190, which was the task force kind of bill for, it goes back to a project we had quite a few years ago on what's referred to as the Heartland Industrial Complex. I don't know if that's a high priority or not. I don't know. I think I'd ask the Business Council to chime in on that one and get their opinion. Yes, Director, we just call on you out of the blue.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair, members of the committee. My name is Josh Turrell. I'm the CEO of the Wyoming Business Council. And we support looking at these types of things. In fact, there are efforts underway already at the Business Council to look at the industrial sites around the state and also to look at the markets that would utilize those so that we can assess what it might take to develop one of those or many of those, and just truly understand the market behind it as well as the capabilities that we have here. So, I could answer any questions on that particular work that we're doing, but from our perspective, it's a good use of effort and definitely one that we think this committee should be really informed about and understand so that we can make the right policy and funding mechanisms possible. And I'll happily stand for any questions.
Questions for the director? Thanks, Director. I know you have some more things on here, but you were here, so I'll take advantage of that. Okay. Next one at the bottom, page 13 is state. Oh, yes.
Let's go back to 190 for just a minute. That bill did not come out on the floor yesterday on the Senate side.
Oh, okay.
And I'd like to, so it's gone. I'd like to see if we
Okay.
can take a really good hard look at this and bring it back as a committee bill.
Okay. Okay, any comments, questions on that one? Okay, did everyone hear Senator Cooper's comments? Okay. House Bill 190 did not come out on the Senate floor yesterday, so it is indefinitely postponed, at least for the rest of this session. Senator Cooper suggested we take a look at that concept as a committee bill. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to echo Senator Cooper's comments. I think this is really important and we need to look at it for the whole state. So I think that should be a priority and we should look at it as an interim topic.
Okay, so Director Durrell, I would suggest that you may want to key up, probably not for the first meeting, maybe for the second meeting, a concept for us on that one. Okay, thank you. Okay, the bottom of page 13, Wyoming State Geologic Survey, really all that would be is an update on their aeromag work and mapping and the work they're doing at looking at materials coming out of our mine tailings, the partings above and under the coal seams in some of our mines. There was indication from one initially that there may be economically recoverable deposits of cobalt associated with one, and I think I'd just like more information considering the value that cobalt currently has on the market, but I would not give that a real high priority. I'm in the middle of page 14. House Bill 213, which was a personal bill. I'm not sure I would make that a committee bill. Just something to consider on, it was energy production property tax exemptions, and we may want to look at taking that to all industrial property at a certain level. Your hand drill from your local hardware store, I don't think so. $2 million compressor that's going to set for 16 months, I think we might want to look at that. So we have a lot of stuff on the interim, and if that was a personal bill, sure, I'd like it to be a committee bill, but I'll continue it as a personal bill if the committee feels that's more appropriate. Comments, questions? Senator Ellis, I could tell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My only thought is, just having served on revenue for 4 years, that might be more appropriate for the revenue committee, but
Okay,
I like that issue.
all right, I'll make a note. Okay. Bottom of page 14, had a request to look at geothermal energy in Wyoming. And I forget, was it Representative Heiner? Was that yours? Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of years ago, we had a bill to allocate $300,000 to do a survey of what is the potential for geothermal energy in Wyoming. We don't know what we don't know. Through the vast drilling program we've had over the years here in Wyoming, we know we have some hot spots. But are they economically feasible to exploit into a clean geothermal energy or not? We need to evaluate that. I'd like to evaluate that and see what the potential is.
Okay, so Representative Heiner, Do you recall, I remember the 300,000 for the survey, what the result was. Did we ever get a report or anything?
It was never taken up.
Okay, all right, so maybe we should. I would add in there also, because I know there is a current project that has gone after FERC permitting on a pumped hydro project in relation to Seminole Reservoir, so maybe we can lump all of those together. Questions, comments? Okay.
Representative Heiner, how do you feel about lumping those topics?
I think that would be a great idea. Those are both, I think they would be short topics, and we could treat them in a minimal amount of time, but we'll see if there's if it's palatable to the organization to look at those.
Thank you.
All right. Page 15, I had the advanced recycling of plastics on my list. We've already talked about it. Okay. Director Parfit, bottom of page 15, update review of underground injection control class 6 wells, CCUS. Have we covered that already in enough detail for you? Okay, so good. Okay, so do you want to take it over again,
Okay.
Mr. Co-Chair?
On page 16 now, bias motivated crime law. Shelley Duncan, I saw you in the room. Welcome back, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a bill that, and I have model legislation as well, so it wouldn't take much time. I have been approached by over 40 different corporations and businesses. Many of them are located here in the state, and they have asked for this. The military has asked for this. We are only one of 4 states in the country without a bias crime law. Us, Arkansas, Indiana, and South Carolina. Over 30, there are 30 that have banned together with this, plus a few more have come together. We are the equality state, but we don't have non-discrimination or bias crime on the bills. So this has come from our business communities, big corporations. Some of the bigger companies want to come here. When they don't have this on their books, we've actually had a company not come. We have other companies that have contacted me and said that there's part of corporate structure that they need to meet some of these pillars, and this is one of those that they need to meet. So this, to me, why I'm in business economic development is because businesses are wanting this, they're needing this. It's time for us to step up.
And Shelley, then you're thinking in terms of bringing minerals because of the economic development concept in this?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct,
All right.
Chairman.
Thank you. Questions for, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Duncan, have you considered taking this to judiciary where they have more expertise in laws and writing laws?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Hyder, yes. And they have, they've done something similar, but it really is more of a, we really don't even need to debate this very much. There has been some examples of personal bills, but we have model legislation since we're one of the last states. It wouldn't take very long to do, but it really needs to be more focused on business. And that's why I'm here. Plus, this is home.
That's right. Further questions for Shelley, committee? Anybody else in the room want to testify on this? All right. Thank you, Shelley, appreciate it. Go ahead.
I have the next one, too.
So you do.
Mr.
Continue
Chairman,
on.
this is non-discrimination. We're one of 19 states that hasn't done this. Again, we're the equality state, yet we're not keeping up with the rest of the nation. So this is one of the things I really want to push is that in this, we do have exceptions. I have a lot of model legislation as well, that we can have exceptions for religious organizations, religion, private entities and such. This would be only towards public access, maybe state employees and such. Again, this was brought to me. I would beg the committee to, a little bit is better than nothing. So we need to really look at this and move forward.
Committee non-discrimination legislation questions? All right.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may, I actually have, one of the very last pages is childcare, if you want me to do that now.
Yeah, let's
or
go ahead and take it now.
Okay. That is on page 20. And it goes on over to page 21.
Everybody got it? Go ahead, Shelley.
So I've been contacted by a company called Wonder School. And what they've done is they've worked in multiple other states. And what we would like to address is, it seems like this wouldn't be the right committee at first for childcare and childcare deserts. However, when you look at the statistics, looking at this program and this company that came to me, basically, one of the programs that they created in Nevada, in 2022, the goal was 50 new providers in the first 6 months, and they easily surpassed that by 86. And the program started only within 3 months. It created 775 new childcare slots and had an economic impact of over $30 million in the first year. And they project that in 2023, they'll help 225 new providers get started, and the economic impact will be estimated between $59 and $91 million annually. The focus isn't necessarily on childcare centers, however, they do them, but it's also with home-based care. The goal is for us to, this is the part that's exciting, the goal is to also look at traditional care, a 24-hour care, support our military families, bilingual infant care, and outdoor and play and rural families. So there's a lot of things that we found during the pandemic that we had a lot of providers and a lot of essential workers that didn't have this care. They didn't have 24 hours. And so some people even had to stay home and cut jobs because they just didn't have the care. So this is one of those things that if you hear from the workforce, if you hear from different things across the lack of being able to have workers and such, one of the reasons that people changed or are not working is because the expense. Currently, in the state of Wyoming, the current child care for a year is more than UW tuition. So we have a desert throughout our state. There was a $3.3 million preschool development renewal grant through the U.S. Department of Health that was awarded to the state. We need to use that. So this program and this subject is really a big deal. We have a supply of 22,699. We have a demand of 28,092, which means we're short 5,393. So
Thank you.
it's
Shelley,
looking at all that as an economic
Are you
development.
using Department of Family Services as the pivot point for this, or what?
Potentially.
Okay, thank you. Questions, committee? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Shelley, why do you think this committee is the best place for this topic rather than education?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lawley, I submitted to both. My reasoning for here is because of the economic development aspect of it, if it doesn't get picked up in education. I'm pretty sure it'll be picked up in education, but I still wanted it to be on your guys' radar.
Thank you. Further questions? All right, thank you, Shelley. All right. Yeah, 17 commended. We've got regulation equalization. Lori Urbicite.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Quick. Wow, you were just
I'm
there.
fast. Poof, here I am. Yes, I bring this to you. There's, over the last several sessions, we've noticed more and more bills that have been brought forward that give the state the ability to regulate certain aspects of sales of certain products. And Chairman Dockstader had one in 21, I believe, that was utility connections. And we just think it might be a fine time to take a look at maybe that in connection with housing as well, and I see at the end of or on page 23, you have another proposed housing one. We do need to work on workforce housing. It is a critical issue, and we made some progress. We worked on it last interim in corporations, I believe, but we still have a lot more to do, and I think taking an overall look at local regulations may be a good starting point. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Questions, committee?
Chairman?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, I don't understand this. It seems really broad. So I just heard utility and housing, but can we just get a little more, what exactly do you want to look at?
Lori?
Mr. Chairman, there was a bill introduced in the House that didn't make it up the calendar that had to do with rental regulations and having that be a state preempted area, along with the many states are looking at a state regulation regarding accessory dwelling units, impact and development fees. These are things that if the state took a hard look at those, they could possibly start solving some of the problems of why we don't have workforce housing and why we are not having developments in some of the areas that we need to have.
Follow up? Good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Question, thank you, Lori. All right. Looks like Mr. Conrad has something, establishment of statute of limitations, WYDEQ.
Yes,
Go
Mr.
ahead.
Chairman, members of the committee, I'd like to propose an interim topic specifically as it relates to establishment of the status limitations as it relates to the Wyoming DEQ. In reviewing various laws throughout the United States, the statute of limitations are a variety of years, 1 year to 10 years, et cetera. I'd like to place in the books through a collaborative relationship and partnership with the Wyoming DEQ, something that denotes what our statute of limitations are as it relates to environmental fines and appropriate violations.
Questions, committee? Committee, questions? Anybody from the audience want to talk to this, speak to this? Director, you're being called up again, I think. Go ahead.
Any comments?
Yeah, I guess the comment would be is that, yeah, we look to be timely with our actions as an agency, and, you know, there may be some one-offs that where we're not, but we're happy to have the conversation on how we can either define statutory limitations on when we can do that. I would also say that we need to keep in mind we need to be in compliance with our primacy programs. So even if the state doesn't take an action, the federal agencies can overfile.
Representative Conrad, while you have the director there, anything?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman?
You've got the director in the seat. Do you have any questions?
No, sir, I think we can work together specifically to establish that by attaining our more importantly, our regulations and our laws with the EPA as well.
Okay, thank you, Representative. Thank you, Director. Appreciate it. Representative Heiner, you're up with the solid waste districts crossing state lines.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we heard during the last few months about some waste that's being transported out of state. We, as the state, we have cleaned up a lot of our solid waste disposal facilities here within the state, spent tens of millions of dollars and done an admirable job. But we heard through testimony that some of this waste is going out of state because the costs are lower as they go to unlined pits out of state. And Mr. Chairman, I don't know the answer, what we could or should do here. That's something that is, I don't know how to resolve this. So it may be a topic that is beyond our purview, beyond our control, but I know particularly on this side of the state that they are disposing in some landfills outside of the state boundary that are unlined. And I don't know what the risk to the state will be in the future, if any.
Meaning that if they take our material, we are reliable? Okay. All right, thank you. Questions, committee?
Mr. Chairman, maybe the DEQ has some comments on this. They may have a solution that makes this topic meaningless.
Go ahead, Director. Just start speaking as soon as you sit down.
So, Mr. Chairman, Representative Heiner, yeah, we are aware that there are some communities that have their municipal waste go to other states. And that's permissible as long as the other state is willing to accept that. Whether or not there's any longstanding liability, none that I'm aware of. But there are instances where I know material has been sent to other states and the other state has returned the material at the expense of the state. So it's something worth taking a look at.
Committee, questions for the director or Representative Heiner? Okay, thank you. Anything else from the room? No. All right. On to page 19. Director Durrell, Economic Development, creating dialogue, breaking barriers, capitalizing on opportunities.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair, members of the committee. I don't think that this one is very groundbreaking because we've heard about it in a number of the proposed interim topics that have come about, that economic development and the policies that we have for economic development and the tools that we have are things that we need to continue to look at. So this is really just a request to be part of that and to really make sure that we lean in. I would say that a couple years ago, this committee attempted to take a deep dive into the Business Council and our programs and methods to do that. And I'll just say that the CEO at that time, who happens to be the CEO at this time, probably had a failure of understanding fully how we could do that. Now we have a much better view of what's going on in the state as well as the programs that we have. And I think it's a great time to make sure that we lean in on that. And so ultimately, this is just an overview of many of the things that you've heard already.
Director, based on your findings, you would think of a restructure possibility?
Mr. Co-Chair, I don't know if it's necessarily a restructure, but I do think that there are some elements of the statutes that govern us as well as the programs that we have that may need some tweaking and some fixing to address the challenges that we have today versus the challenges that they were intended to fix.
Thank you. Committee questions for the director? Comments from the room? Director, you're still in the hot seat. On to broadband.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. A few years ago, the broadband office, we'll use air quotes on that, was developed and placed in the Wyoming Business Council. That was without any appropriation. We just utilized the staff that we had to do that. But we did have at that time a $10 million budget to do broadband projects throughout the state. Since that time, with CARES Act funding, we had a $100 million program, of which $50 million were utilized for broadband projects throughout the state. And now we have a number of federal programs that we're administering and helping get out there to deal with and underserved to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars. So in some ways, that broadband office, as well as that fund, is sort of ill-equipped to handle the demands of the broadband programs that we're dealing with. What I'm proposing here is a look at how we should structure that broadband office, as well as how we utilize the $10 million that has been put in for us, and look at restructuring how we can use that money to better administer the other funds that are available to us as a state.
Director, that original 10 million just been sitting there while we take care of the federal money that was coming in.
Mr. Co-Chair, yes, that is correct. It is just sitting there gaining interest.
Okay, fair enough. Committee questions for the director on broadband. Anybody else in the room would like to comment on this? Director, any closing comments? Are we good?
Mr. Co-Chair, no, thank you.
Thank you. Good approach with the Business Council on the first topic. Thank you. Okay. Getting there. First right of refusal. Representative Knapp right here at the table.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. This topic was related to House Bill 267, giving Wyoming actually matching rights to any land, water, or mineral rights being conveyed to the federal government, somewhat in opposition of the 30 by 30 program. The bill was presented to Appropriations, who tabled it pending interim discussion. However, they recommended several committees to have this touch. One was minerals and one was ag. Ag seeming to be the more appropriate because of the predominant land issues. But this would allow Wyoming to an opportunity to control its future, basically, in using a layering approach for land use, access, federal government swaps, and mineral rights and development. So this is just an opportunity to go forward. And I don't know that it would be a committee bill as much as continuing on with personal bill, but certainly it touches several committees and for information and input.
Representative Knapp, having worked on this, why do you think we're behind on this issue?
I'm sorry.
Why do you think we're behind on this issue? This is something that seems like should have been done earlier.
Yeah, and I think it's been looked at before. You know, we had the Occidental issue. We had before Teton lands possibly being swapped for Powder River Basin mineral rights. And I think we've piecemealed it, whether it's access rights or whether it's the use of state lands. However, with the federal government ramping up in its program for conservation lands, I think it's time that we take a true look at this, and it's a way that Wyoming can basically control our own future when it comes to minerals, when it comes to land use, when it comes to access.
Land, water, all of that.
Correct.
Colorado River fits in there somewhere?
Yes, exactly.
All right, very good.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
So Representative Knapp, would this also be used to address the issue that came up this past year with the transfer of a large ranch west of Casper to the federal government without the state having any input, any discussion?
Mr. Co-Chair, yes, absolutely. We're seeing larger and larger swaths of land being approached by the federal government. And of course, they have unlimited pockets, but this at least gives us an opportunity to have a kind of a say in that playing field.
Thank you. So,
Go ahead.
Mr. Co-Chairman, looking at the overlap between ag, minerals, all of that, I would ask Representative Heiner, he'll be chairing Select Federal Natural Resource Management, if this might be a good fit for his committee, and consider it that committee was set up for those overlaps.
Representative Heiner.
I think that would be a great idea. Mr. Chairman, I think that would be a great idea.
Willing to take on the workload. Sounds like we're behind, sir. You better catch up.
Thank you.
Okay.
So Representative Knapp, are you okay with that? If we
Yes, thank
transfer
you.
this one over to Select Federal Natural Resource, they can write legislation, but it'll come back actually to this committee to then
Absolutely.
interim.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair.
Okay.
Yeah. Committee comments, questions, people in the room? No, let's keep going on. Okay, next page, over to 22, increased refining liquid fuels capacity. Again, Mr. Luthi. Go ahead, sir.
Mr. Chairman, thank you again for your generosity. You know, this committee has a reputation of being willing to take on complicated, thorny issues, and this is possibly one. And I just want to lay out the problem because I don't have the solution. Let's go back to about November, December. Opal, the company there that runs the processing facility, decided that it was economically, it made more sense to continue to supply more natural gas than it was to pull propane out of that system. Therefore, we had a propane shortage for much of the southwestern Wyoming. Fast forward to early January, late December, when Suncor lost at least a third of their refining capacity for a period of 3 to 4 months out of just north of Denver, Commerce City. Once again, refining capacity becomes diminished. What the governor did in those times was to use his power to issue emergency orders, which would allow truck drivers to exceed their hours of service. Why that is a solution to help getting the supply of the important gas and fuels, it is not necessarily the best answer, but it is an answer. Let's look at Holly Frontier, Sinclair here in Cheyenne. Their entire capacity, and again, economic decision, they're free to do that, they should be able to do that, but their entire output is renewable diesel. It goes outside of the state of Wyoming. We don't get any benefit of it at all. Holly Frontier Sinclair, a portion of theirs goes outside. And again, economic decision, that's their right to do so. So what we bring to you is maybe the committee would like to look at the possibility of how do we increase refining capacity or storage capacity within the state of Wyoming. The gas and diesel working group that met last summer looked at this as a possibility. If you have more supply that can stay in the Rocky Mountain region, that should help with the disruptions which often occur either because of weather or other things. Now, the trick is, how do we do that so it's proper for the role of government, it's constitutional, and how best to actually make it work? So I can't think of a better subject for this committee to try and figure out.
Mr. Luthi, is there a summary sheet on the working group's findings from last summer?
Absolutely, I'd be happy to share that with you.
It'd be good to have the committee have this. Committee, questions for Mr. Luthi? Questions? Anybody else in the room want to speak on this? Thank you, Randall. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thorny issues. Yeah, a lot of work, a lot of thorny issues this session. All right, coordinated energy-related development. Marcio, are you in the room? Did I see you? No. Anybody would like to speak to this? I just know the overview, basically. I'll just read quickly a summary out of respect. Developing energy and related industry requires a delicate balance of stakeholders' interests, significant investments, emerging technologies, and infrastructure policy and regulatory evolution. The part that interests me is the emerging technologies. Folks, I travel to a lot of meetings, mostly at my own expense, all related to energy. And I sense and feel that we may be behind some of these other states that are aggressively going after this new energy. I'm not talking just the renewables, but just finding how to use the old school products as well. So that does have some merit. Anybody have any comments on this topic, coordinated energy related development? Anybody in the room?
You're okay.
Okay, all right, thank you. Page 23, formulated collaborative solutions for Wyoming's housing shortage. David Frazier, but we have Bob here. You're better than David, right? Mr. McLeod, thank you for joining us. Difficult topic, difficult solutions. What do you suggest?
Mr. Chairman, Bob McLaurin with WHAM. We'd like to request this topic. We worked on it the last interim. We think this is an appropriate committee because we believe that affordable workforce housing is a fundamental component of successful economic development. We're seeing it all over the state. It's not just a problem in Jackson and Sheridan and Cody. It's in Shoshone. It's in some of the small towns all over the state. Be happy to answer any questions.
Seeing it all, it's like the issue of property taxes. Everybody's feeling that love now. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you tell us what efforts are currently underway at the local, at the county municipal levels to encourage their local developers and private capital to take up this issue?
Mr. McClure?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, you know, we have 99 cities around the state, and so they're all different, but I would say the one I'm the most familiar with is up in the northwest corner. I know that we're using zoning to try to increase density. We are working, the town of Jackson is working actively to do that. Quite honestly, you get some pushback from neighbors when you try to increase density. But we have worked with a lot of private developers. The market, at least in the Jackson Hole area, is just, there's a market failure. So unless you do something to work with the private sector, there's not going to be a product that can be brought on for less than $1 million or so. So we've worked with zoning ordinances. We've created public-private partnerships to build housing. We've passed SPET taxes to help fund some of that housing. I know the town of Shoshone is working on an affordable housing project as well. I'm not sure the specifics of that.
As Bob mentions those taxes, bed taxes, that's a local solution to step up and say, we're putting some money on the table. But the state may need to look at solutions as well, because this is statewide. Not everybody can create that tax form at their local level just yet.
Mr. Chairman, follow up?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So you mentioned SPED taxes. Where have they been used and what's the status of them?
Pardon?
I said, where have they been used and what is the current status of them in terms of trying to resolve this issue?
SPED taxes has been used, I believe, to my knowledge, just in Jackson for housing. Obviously, SPEDs is a tax. It can be used for whatever purpose the electorate deems appropriate. But we have passed over the past 15 years, probably $50 million in local sales taxes to fund affordable housing. The other thing you see happening around the state is where the town will go in and work on a public-private partnership to either provide some of the ground or to help with the financing to bring units on. So it's primarily a Jackson issue, but that tool is available for every town in the state.
Anything else? Okay. Larson Jones, Sweetwater County, all is well with housing there?
Mr. Chairman, Sweetwater County is going to be impacted severely coming up. We've got a lot of economic development on the horizon, and we're not prepared. So we definitely will need help and great ideas and some collaboration.
It's one of those touchy subjects, Mr. Clare notes. If you congest the housing too much, then the neighbors say no, and it's a difficult situation. It's not going to go away, though. All right. Bob, anything else you'd like to say to this?
No, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Committee, anybody in the room like to speak to it? Thank you, Bob. Go back and tell the other fellow you're the A-team now. Okay. Oh, go ahead. I didn't see you behind the post. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. Committee. I just wanted to let you know that this housing topic has been submitted to a number of committees for consideration, minerals, labor, and appropriations. And so with your wisdom, I hope it is placed in the right committee for solutions.
You're hoping one of those committees will be friendly.
Hopefully, yeah, thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Committee questions? Thank you for stepping up to note that. All right, final topic, electromagnetic pulse. Mr. Shaner, are you in the room? Someone know anything about this? Senator Ellis. Oh, yeah, there's your name right there. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was approached by Mr. Shaner, who you'll see on this sheet. Essentially, this sounds a little far-fetched, but it's actually not. Our federal government has looked at what would happen if an electromagnetic pulse attack occurred in the United States. This essentially could be accomplished by detonating a nuclear weapon mid-atmosphere. If you do that, there have been some studies and looks at this nationally of what that would mean for our energy grid, just crippling business. Although this has been kind of a federal issue, not a lot has happened at that level. So I believe the bringer who brought this request to me, the request would be to look at our vulnerabilities, maybe even identify some possibility or some planning that could occur, some costs related to hardening our systems and just trying to prepare and prevent, if this were to happen to us, just being ready for it. And so I would say that, this might seem a little far-fetched, but coming from a pre-COVID era where I don't think we would have ever, looked at what would we need to do to prepare for a mass pandemic. In 2019, we all probably would have laughed at that. So I think there might be some merit in just having this discussion and maybe even setting up a framework of, if we're going to have some requirements for our energy sectors to report to the Public Service Commission or Homeland Security, talking about the confidentiality of some of that. So I don't know, I think it might have some merit.
Senator Ellis, who knows about such things as this? Who would come in to testify? Who would help with this?
Thank
I
you.
understand confidentiality because you don't want to, some don't want to disclose all the energy sources and all that, so.
Sure.
That's,
I think maybe I'm asking Homeland Security
okay.
to be a resource. And as I've been doing just a little internet sleuthing on my own, there's quite a bit of material out there in federal reports I think we could start pulling together.
Things can change fast, March of 2020. Go ahead, Mr. Heiner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, maybe Rick Kaysen would be able to enlighten us if this is something that they could weigh in on. Is it something that they have
Mr.
looked at
Kaysen.
the risks from the perspective of our largest utility?
Go ahead, sir.
Mr. Chairman, Rick Kaysen, representing Rocky Mountain Power, to Representative Heiner's inquiry. I think this is something that is of importance, and I do not know precise information as far as what might be in the history of Rocky Mountain Power, but we'll be passing this on for information and to be ready for if this makes the final cut for this committee.
Mr. Kaysen, in all of your work with your company in the energy sector, has there been any discussion about this at all?
No, sir. When I first read this, Mr. Chairman, I read the electromagnetic pulse. I went back to my earlier days of electric magnetic fields. So I don't know if there's a relationship to this or not, but I am not aware of in-depth discussion.
Okay, thank you. Committee questions? Oh, we have someone else from the energy sector. Go ahead, sir.
I'm glad he volunteered because I was going to call on him if he didn't.
We saw you looking at it. Go ahead.
I felt the icy stare coming my way. David Bush, Black Hills Energy. Mr. Chairman, when I first started with Black Hills about 5 years ago, there was several meetings that happened between our company and the Wyoming Military Department, Homeland Security, some others looking at this issue as well as other issues around grid safety and that sort of thing. But there was some focus on this electromagnetic pulse issue. I don't know that it is actually that far-fetched. I think it's pretty much a reality. So it is something a few years ago anyway that was being looked at. I'm not sure the status of that now. I could certainly find out and let the committee know. But I think overall, infrastructure, grid reliability issues, and security are certainly something that we're taking a real hard look
So
at.
not necessarily this main topic, but grid safety, because we've had some attacks out there, and no doubt that's part of your conversations for both companies and all companies now, right?
Yes, sir. We are definitely looking at that, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, it's not on our list directly, but I think that brings up a good point. We may want to look at grid security, safety in light of those attacks on the grids in other places. I've got some questions on
It's
it.
a reality.
So-
Yes, it is. Go ahead.
I think, Mr. Chairman, in putting this on here, I think my vision for it would be, visiting with those that are providing these services, getting some feedback from you of, their costs, what are some of your barriers for maybe hardening? Like, what would it take to really beef up our security of some of these facilities? I don't know if we'll always have this one-time money, but certainly as we've been spending money this session and looking at appropriate uses for those funds, I think that I'd be curious to know what some of those costs would be. And then, being sensitive to the fact that there might be classified information, how do we just set up the right process so that this information is protected if we want some kind of reporting or oversight to make sure that things are happening? Maybe it doesn't happen in a legislative context where we're asking you, how are you, share the playbook of how you're defending your facilities. But just thinking of the right structure for it.
Gentlemen, a response?
Mr. Chairman, I think that's a legitimate idea, and we can certainly look into that. I don't know what all the rules and regulations are around what we can and can't share and how that would happen, but I think that's definitely something that I know our company is looking at and has been for a while. Certainly, there's been some attacks in the news lately that have brought the issue really to the forefront of a lot of people's minds. So it's something we're definitely looking at, and we can sit down and figure out a way to share some of that information.
So, so if we were to pursue this, it'd probably be electromagnetic would be just to start the pulse situation, but a much bigger picture, protect the system.
Mr. Chairman, if I may add to what Mr. Bush has said, the grid reliability, the stability of our systems, the growth that comes onto that as well is I think is a 24/7 project, or not a project, but it's an operational manner for our company. Because we know the need for the power to be delivered, the security of the systems as well, and what it means for the entire state. So
Power off in 110-degree weather or 20 below, and things get.
the full parameter, yes, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Taylor wants to.
I noticed him come up. So. Yeah. Go ahead, sir.
I couldn't let my utility folks testify all by themselves. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Sean Taylor with the Wyoming Rural Electric Cooperatives. Like Mr. Bush said, we also participated in those planning sessions, meetings with Homeland Security, Military Affairs. And it was probably about 5 or 6 years ago, I believe. I don't know whatever really came out of that, but it was more of a, let's get a sense of what we have out there, what we're currently doing, and maybe what needs to be done in the future. Be happy to participate if this moves forward. But like Mr. Case and Mr. Bush, for the co-ops, we're constantly looking at the threats, whether it's EMPs, cybersecurity, guns, people shooting at transformers, any of that, and working to harden the system when and where we can and with what funds we can. So,
Mr. Taylor, you're saying it's already part of the discussion with the co-ops around the state and the power companies as big as these folks?
Mr. Chairman, EMPs haven't been brought up for a while, but that was part of the focus, like with the Homeland Security about 5 or 6 years ago.
Okay.
But everything else that we've seen happen, it's a constant
I sense
discussion.
some room for opportunity here, maybe not necessarily in a committee bill, but overall. Okay, thank you. Anything else, committee, for Mr. Taylor or any of these three? Anybody in the room would like to comment? Thank you, gentlemen, appreciate it. Okay, folks, that ends our list. Anybody in this room would like to comment on anything regarding any topic before we close out? Committee, anything that you would like to bring to our attention before we close out? All right.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
Real quick, just a thank you to staff for putting all of this together, Kelly especially, and that we do appreciate it. There was a lot of work there. And
Fast did
for
you type, Kelly?
the new committee members, the format is what these generally look like. You probably haven't seen these before. So this is a general uniform format we use for interim topics.
Great. Mr.
Done.
Cooper.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I see about 60 days worth of work here to cram into 6 days is part of it. We're going to have to make sure that we, for example, pull all of our CCSU bills together, our business councils like House Bill 190, the Harvard study, those things all together, our Homeland Security issues. Now those things, we got to be able to lump them together and try to look them as, so what's the process here?
So now, co-chairs and I were already talking about lumping some of these together. But this is your opportunity, if you have a strong desire or feeling to see one of these topics pursued, then you get a hold of your respective chair in the next couple of days before we close out. And the idea is that we will consolidate this, lump some together, and then bring our top topics to the Management Council for consideration. So I noticed that some of you taking good notes. If you have something you'd like to share with us, get it done before we wrap it up and go home, okay?
Would you prefer, Mr. Chairman, that we bring you our priority list to you?
That'd be fine, yeah. And then I'll be sitting down with the co-chair and we'll be looking, comparing notes and getting things ready for Management Council. One more time, anybody in the room, anything else? Committee, anything else? Meeting's adjourned, thank you.